So welcome everyone, thanks for joining me for this presentation on the leading lights in conservation and wildlife tourism using four of our partners, so four Senderos partners as an example in Argentina and in Brazil. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gareth and our company Senderos is a tourism marketing and PR company for mostly small remote lodges, boutique hotels and expedition ships in South America and in Costa Rica in amazing locations, of course. All of them offer very special experiences and many of them are linked in to their communities. Today I'm presenting four of these partners. These are, sorry, I lost my cursor. These are shown here on the map. So we've got three in Brazil, Crystallino Lodge Caiman and Refugio Ecológico Caiman. And then in Patagonia, we have Vegetation. And these are the four properties. So they're all pioneers in the conservation and protection of fragile biomes, ecosystems, and of course the wildlife there. All of them are in the situation like all such people. They're in the situation that they facing these great challenges, but also opportunities, if you like, to give financial value to conservation. They're not luxury hotels in a traditional sense. That's typical really for most of our partners. We have very few which one would describe as five-star partners. Ecotourism helps, of course, to finance the projects that they're doing, these guys. But it's not enough normally to live off that. So I'm just trying to get rid of my picture so you can see. There you go, hopefully that's better. Or at least I can't see me. So yeah, so they make some money through ecotourism, but it's not enough to survive. So of course it helps to encourage their guests to become more sensitized, more sensitive to the whole issue of conservation. If they're not already, the chances are a lot of them will be, which is why they choose these places. Yeah, that's the main thing, is then at least they will come home hopefully as ambassadors for these places, or at least for, with a new conscience and knowledge of how important it is to preserve these places. Of course, it's not just the owners; it's also the amazing people who work in these places who are coming up with a sustainable alternative to the abuse and monoculture use of these regions, which threatens to decimate vast swathes of natural beauty. And of course, at the moment, that's a particular problem in Brazil with this government. Okay, so we're going to start off with Vegetation, which is in Patagonia along the coast, 3.5 hours south of Valdez Peninsula. So 3 hours south of Trelew, the airport at Trelew, and 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours north of Comodoro Rivadavia. Both have airports. Trelew obviously has better connections. Also, I dare say, if you've got clients who want to do whale watching, they will be going to Valdez, and they could spend the night there to try and see the whales, and then combine that with a stay in Vegetation of 3 and 4 nights. The reason I say that is it's quite difficult to see whales in Vegetation. Every year there are sightings, but it's not easy, and the chances are better in Valdez. And that's important, obviously, to note that that goes up till early mid-December. After that, then you don't get them up in Valdez either. I'm sure most of you know that. The lodge is open from October until April, which obviously is also the best time to see wildlife. Also quite a good time weather-wise, generally sunny, gets quite hot, of course, in the summer months of December, January. But if you got bird watchers, the very best time, I'd say, is from November. But generally, the wildlife is there from October until it starts to migrate in April. So Bahia Bustamante is a small, remote, family-run wildlife sanctuary. It's also a sustainable sheep farm and eco lodge, surrounded by steppe, countryside, and also the southern Atlantic Ocean. The physical infrastructure, I'd say, is simpler than most of our partners, so it doesn't need careful selling, but that takes nothing away from what is really a very special, unique, and authentic experience. Sorry, those are all overused words, but it is really true in the case of Bahia Bustamante. So you have fantastic views from the lodge, 360 degrees all the way around. Bahia Bustamante has been described by the New York Times a few years ago as Argentina's secret to the Galapagos, as there aren't many places in the world where you can see such a diversity of bird life and marine mammals. Unlike Galapagos, of course, you have very few people there because it's a private reserve. Excuse me. The Bahia Bustamante is part or located in two parks. One of them is a national marine park called the Patagonia, Patagonia Austral. It's also part of a UNESCO Blue Patagonia Biosphere Reserve. And these are important breeding, feeding, migration sites for not far off 700 bird types, bird species, also for mammals and marine species. And so it's a very important area for research for scientists, as is Bahia Bustamante. This picture shows half-day navigation in a bay very close to Bahia Bustamante. And as you can maybe just about make out, the people are looking at up to 4,000 sea lions and lots of seabird colonies, which can be found in this season. There, it's up to 4,000 sea lions, and altogether they have 120 different bird species at Bahia Bustamante. Not going to go into details about what they all are, but there's, like in this picture, there's great egrets, oystercatchers, cormorants, flamingos, and in fact 13 of the 16 species which nest in Argentina, they do so out by Bahia Bustamante, including 2 threatened endemic species. But having said that, they actually are found here in pretty good numbers. There's a flightless duck and an Olrog seagull, excuse me, which some people, twitchers of course, will come to see specially, but Bahia Bustamante's appeal is much greater. It's for general nature lovers, I'd say. Where's my cursor gone? There you go. So not just bird life, lots of steppe wildlife as well, including these maras in the top left, lesser rheas on the right, guanacos, grey foxes. We also saw armadillos and skunks while we were there. So there's plenty to see, and they are relatively easy to see. Not so much the skunks and the armadillos, but the others are. This just shows a map of the area. So you have plenty of activities here. They are done by four-wheel drive, by bike, on foot, on horseback. I'll talk to you later about that. then 90% of them are guided, if not more. There are some options as well, depending on what accommodation you book, to do these as self-guided excursions. But generally, you're doing these, for example, here in these old Land Rovers, which I would stress, so they don't use spanking new four-wheel drives. In keeping with their very sustainable credentials, they are using these Land Rovers because they still work. They're pretty old, but they're part of the place and they fit very nicely. The whole ethos of the place, as long as they're working, why get rid of them? There are more comfortable, newer vehicles which they don't have, which you'll find in five-star hotels and the like. But they're perfectly comfortable and they fit very nicely, I think. On all activities, you have these sort of picnics or snack sessions, in addition to the normal meals, of course. Bahia Bustamante is having all of these bird species. It's an IVA, so it's an important birding area, as so designated by BirdLife International. And just as you see birds like this, or the penguins like this in Punta Tombo further north, which obviously is well known for the big penguin colony there, they also have 100,000 here at Bahia Bustamante in the season, or up to 100,000. I don't know when they were last counted. But they're there for the whole season, and you can see them like at Punta Tombo in their nesting sites. But unlike at Punta Tombo, there's only a maximum of 25 people, normally fewer, because that's the maximum number of the people that are staying at Bahia Bustamante. And you can visit or you can walk around, take your time. It's not like in Punta Tombo where it's more regimented, so you have plenty of time to stand and watch, obviously at a safe distance, and the guides are very strict on that, but it's a real highlight here. Some lovely pictures, but also you get to see them, which isn't the case up further north, is you get to see them from the boat that you'll be in. So it's great to watch them swimming around the boat, underneath and to the sides, obviously having a good time, and that's an experience that you don't have when you're in the sites further north. They also have on the main island, which I should have pointed out to you, on the main peninsula, called Gravinha, they have some beautiful beaches, and you can swim on them. You can go there on horseback. Horseback isn't included, but it can be pre-booked. So when the client does the booking, at the very latest, it has to be done before arrival, and they charge something like $30 for a half day or $65 for a whole day per person. Excuse me. They used to offer sea kayaking as well, but they don't anymore. So if you have that in your product information, please remove it because it's no longer the case. They also have these sort of plunge pools or natural pools, piscinas, where you can sort of sit and take in the amazing views to the sea. Of course, the water is still pretty chilly, but it warms up in the summer. So there's plenty of mad dogs and Englishmen who I'm sure would be very happy to jump in. Moving away from the sea, there's an excursion inland to the Petrified Forest, which is supposedly over 60 million years old. You'll find literally petrified trees and these amazing pieces of wood and stone, which are in these some of them are very small, other slightly bigger chunks. I mean, you get petrified forest obviously in other places as well, including in Patagonia. But again, the charm here is that you're not sharing it with more than a few people who are in your little group. And there's always that amazing feeling of space here where you don't see lots of other people, and they have a lovely walk here where you can walk on a ridge and have these great views around. So this is also a very special excursion. This is about just less than 20 miles away from the main lodge. Everything is nearby. That's a big advantage here compared to also being further north, because if you're up staying in Puerto Madryn or the Trelew area, you have to go quite long distances, as you'll know, a lot of you, to get to the different sites of the different wildlife. Whereas here, obviously, okay, so you don't get the whales here normally, but everything else, this wildlife, is very close by. So you're talking about half-day excursions here with plenty of time on your hands. Because it's a sheep farm, and that's how they survive, basically. They live off the sheep. Production, wool production, they offer a half-day half-day introduction to sustainable wool production. You tend to do that if you're staying 4 nights, probably not so much if you're staying 3, because there's plenty of other things to do, depending on how many activities you want to do. You have amazing sunsets and picnics and sunrises, amazing sunsets and sunrises, and also night skies. They do have amazing picnics. I don't know where I got that from. And really, there's always, I'm sure you'll have experienced it yourself, these amazing places where you go and you just have these incredible night skies where you just want to spend the whole evening looking up. They've got a telescope there as well, which makes it even more fun. So moving to the lodge itself, I haven't mentioned yet that Bahia Bustamante was actually founded as a seaweed settlement in the 1950s by the Spanish grandfather of Matias, who's one of today's owners, and he runs it. At the time, or in the 60s, they had up to 400 workers with their families here, complete with church, school, police station, shops, and funnily enough, the streets are named after seaweed. The owners now, they run it as a very sustainable eco lodge, and as I said, sheep or wool production farm. This I've just I've tried to highlight here the area where the public areas of the hotel part of Bustamante are. So at the front here, to the left of this oval shape, you have the 4 superior sea cabins, and then on the far right, you have the standard sea cabin. So there's 2 of the latter and 4 of the former. Just next to the standard sea cabins, you've got the main restaurant and lodge building, and then here on the top left, in the circle in red, you have the step cabins, which are an alternative form of accommodation and a different way of booking Bahia Bustamante. I'll explain why in a minute. And they, for people who are more independently minded, and probably for people who are hiring a car and traveling around this area independently. So some of their sustainable credentials, so it's pretty much now 80% solar and wind powered, and they have a backup generator. They have, obviously, they're really into their recycling. They have a research project for biologists who they invite and who work at Bahia Bustamante, and they can stay there for nothing. They use spring waters. They have a what's the word? Can't remember what the word is, biodynamic. Fruit and vegetable garden. They run the farm according to sort of a holistic livestock management principles and as best practice. And they have many other initiatives, which when I send this out later, the recording of this, you can click on where it says here and see a whole list of other things that they do. It's a really important and integral part of Bahia Bustamante. This is the view from the restaurant in the main lodge. So you literally can walk out of here, and there's a vineyard here, which I'm not going to show at the moment, but they've got a new project there with a very famous restaurant in Buenos Aires, which they're doing together. And you can walk past there and out in front and go swimming right in front of the lodge, which is pretty amazing, really. And you also have amazing views. Like, for example, if there's Rio when you walk past, and it's relatively normal to see this site. If you turn around, you see the restaurant, which actually used to be the general store of the community. and it looks a bit like it used to be a shop, and they're not worried about making it more like a restaurant. This is very much the ethos, as I said before, of Bustamante, and part of its real charm. The food is wholesome, simple meals, I'd say, using whatever ingredients are available at the time. So if they haven't got any eggs, then there are no eggs, I'm afraid. But they have this very sort of strict, self-imposed, these sustainability principles. It's basically whatever, literally, depending on the season, what they have, what's in the garden at the time, what they can get. It's typically based around seaweed, lamb, fish, seafood, and of course their vegetable patch and fruit patch from the organic gardens. You can see here, they've got the homemade bread on the left. You can't see from here, but those are guanaco and lamb empanadas. Seaweed omelets on the left, or tortillas, and ceviche they also offer. And because we're in Argentina, of course, they have every 2 or 3 days, they have an asado. I'm a vegetarian, and the food is absolutely fine as well. But this is not 5-star cuisine. It's not what your clients who've just been to I don't know, a 5-star restaurant in Buenos Aires, or somewhere like Awazi, for example, if they just come from there, or Puerto Valle, our partner, they get something completely different here because, as I said, it depends what happens to be available at the time. In that same lodge, they have the living room and library, again with this amazing sea view. It's also where they do the historic tour, so clients learn all about the history of the farm, how it was founded, and you know how it progressed, and ultimately how seaweed came out of fashion. It is actually still processed there, but not on anything like the scale it used to be. Then you have the sea cat. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say with the last slide, at the bottom left here, you can see the interpretation center, which is fascinating because they've sort of rebuilt the skeletons of different wildlife, steppe wildlife particularly, but also penguins, and that's in this very simple and charming interpretation center, which is there. These are the sea cabins. They have electricity. These are the superior sea cabins. Actually, they got electricity from 10 in the morning to 11 at night, and they have an emergency light at night. They so there are, as I said before, they all have 2 rooms. They all have 2 rooms, and they will house a maximum of 18 people altogether in the 6 cabins, so 4 superior and 2 standard. They all have a double room with a view to the sea and a view from the other double room to the back. The superior rooms have a shower in the bathroom, and the standard cabins just have a bath with sort of like a hand shower. These are the step cabins, 5 of them. Important to say, these are for people who probably will want to do their own thing. They'll probably have hired a car, bought some food somewhere in the supermarket. The nearest shop is 90 kilometers away, so they have to make sure they get it before they arrive. They can order meals here, and they can join excursions, but generally people who come here and stay in these rooms, which are perfectly comfortable, but they're pretty basic. A lot of people cook in them, they eat in them. And they might have 1 meal maybe in the main restaurant, which they would request locally, and maybe they would do a guided tour as well. Those are ultimately dependent on availability, if the guides are available and if they've got plenty of food, which they have always had up till now. But basically, the priority is always given to the people staying in the sea cabins. And the final picture here shows Matthias in the middle, who runs it now. As I say, the grandson of the original founder from Spain, who came here to make his fortune with seaweed, fortune in inverted commas, and his wife Astrid on his right, and Maria, who some of you who might have worked with Liwe, the MC in the past, they might know Maria. She's been there for a season now and is absolutely passionate about Bustamante. It's fascinating to talk to her as well, because obviously Liwe They've had plenty of high-end clients, as do Bahia Bustamante, but it's very important to know how to sell the Bahia Bustamante, so that if people are wanting really high-end accommodation and top food, cuisine with everything that they would expect in a city, then I'm afraid they might be disappointed on that score here, but it is an amazing experience. I understand completely why Maria and the rest of the team there are passionate about it. Okay, now we're going to move far north to Brazil. I spent a bit longer on Bahia Bustamante because it's a new product for us, so we've only started working with it this year. The others, I hope some of you will know it better, so I'm going to run through these a bit more quickly. So Crystallino, located in the far north of Mato Grosso state, just south of the border with Pará, but still a long way from Belém, the capital of Pará. The southern Amazon, like the rest of the Amazon, is under great threat from deforestation, droughts, fires, road, dam building, logging, mining, soybean farming, and cattle ranching. And of course, particularly at the moment, Brazil is having all sorts, or it's having more problems than it has had before, as regards the fact that the current regime, the president, is quite happy to incentivize people to do their own thing in the Amazon, which obviously is a threat for nature and for the native people. Many tribes, they're still uncontacted, and they live completely separately from modern civilization. To reach this area of Crystallino, you have to fly from the Pantanal. So if you've got people who want to go to Manaus and they want to see the theatre there and the big meeting of the waters and maybe the marketplace, then obviously that's a disadvantage that they can't see those if they come to Crystallino. There are certainly big advantages of coming here, which I'll go into now. So it's about an hour's flight. You fly daily from Cuiabá around early afternoon, just after midday, 1 o'clock, whatever. And it takes an hour and a few minutes to get to Alta Floresta, the nearest town. And then in Alta Floresta, you are picked up, taken to Crystallino Lodge's own hotel, because they have a hotel there on the outskirts of Alta Floresta. And then you're driven and then taken by boat to Crystallino Lodge, which is an extremely comfortable, I have to say luxury, don't like using the word, but it's a very upscale, beautiful lodge. Amazing to think that this place started out as a backpacker camp for birders. Same owners, Vitória da Riva started it then. Her son is our main partner there, Alex, who runs the MD basically of the lodge. And Vitoria's daughter was the architect, so it's a family affair. They don't have air conditioning, but otherwise, and they don't have a pool, but otherwise I'd say it really is a top place. They don't need air conditioning because it's very clever the way they built it, with lots of ventilation, including in the rooms. Open all year, of course. All of these three products in Brazil are open all year. Massive focus on biodiversity. This map on the left shows that this particular region is of extreme importance, even by Amazon standards. You can see the picture on the top right. That's the Amazon river system, and Crystallino is surrounded by three very important rivers, which ultimately determine and are responsible for the high levels of endemic species around Crystallino and the parks around it. And below you see a map of Brazil to show you how far it is roughly from Manaus and Cuiabá below. Where's my cursor gone? There we go. So Crystallino Lodge is part of their own reserve, which is over 11,000 hectares in size. This photo was taken from one of their 50-meter towers. So you can see how important the biodiversity is here, much more so than even in other places in the Amazon. They have 6 types of forest, from evergreen through to flooded. The proximity to the Pantanal and the Cerrado, which we'll be talking about afterwards, two very important natural areas, or beautiful areas, which are all under threat, I'm afraid. That means that you get the wildlife as it's a transitional zone from all three regions. And the fact that you have this undulating topography and the lodge itself is located at 250 meters above sea level, and the trails go up to 450, that means, of course, that you have that much more biodiversity depending on which level of the forest you're in. Finally, there are these three rivers which I mentioned before, the Tapajós, Madeira, and Xingu. And Xingu, excuse me, and these are all, these are so big that Vitoria da Riva told me that there are plenty of birds which won't fly over them because they're so wide, and which, as I say, is a reason why you have so many bird species, particularly in this region, which I'll come to in a few minutes. So you get there, as I mentioned, only by boat. You come along on this main brown river that you can see in the picture, which is called the Teles Pires, and then you have your own little meeting of the waters. And you turn left into the Crystallino River, this black river. I'm sure some of you know that black rivers are highly acidic, and that's the reason why you don't get mosquitoes developing, or the mosquito larvae here on the surface. So Crystallino has that advantage. 1.5 hours, as I said, and then you see this little lodge here. It's a private reserve, so there are no excursions to any indigenous communities or anything like that. It's all about nature here, and there is lots of nature. Of course, you don't always see it because it's the Amazon. It will see you, but it's harder to spot amongst all the vegetation. But Crystallino is definitely one of the places where you see a lot of wildlife compared to other lodges. It's not the Pantanal. You don't see as much in the Pantanal, but you certainly do see wildlife, and you hear a lot more, of course. So there are getting over 600 birds at Crystallino, which is a half of all of the birds in the bird species in the Amazon, and a third of all the species in Brazil. We've got an amazing book, beautiful book, just with a third of the birds that you find there. If any of you are interested, when things get back to normal, I can bring the book along and show you bigger pictures. Also getting on for 100 mammal species so far identified, including the bigger picture which I put in there, which is of the white-whiskered spider monkey, which is endemic. So that's another reason why some people come, especially to see it. And there are over 1,500 species of butterflies. There are certain times of year when it's easy to see more, but you can certainly generally see beautiful butterflies there. And this isn't even to show you pictures of all the amphibians, reptiles, and insects, or the 1,400 odd plant species at Crystallino. So it's very biodiverse. Getting down to excuse me, getting on with the activities there, you have to say in advance if you would like a general nature guide or if you like a bird watching guide. The activities are generally half-day activities in the area around the lodge. So these are lower down, easy to moderate, and they also have upland trails, as I say, higher up. These are more strenuous. They can take a whole day as well. These are you discuss this with the guide the evening before to see what is suitable for whom. They also have a program of photography workshops for different types of wildlife, and study trips, and also something a bit different, yoga and well-being specialist guides. They have these two 50-meter towers with intermediate platforms, a little bit too high for me, but even from halfway up, it was pretty spectacular. They also offer canoeing. There are rapids there in the dry season, but that's not what they're offering. It's gentle river kayaking here. They also have this deck right outside the entrance to the lodge where you can relax during the hotter time of the day between excursions, or sit down in the evening and enjoy a glass of red without necessarily worrying about mosquitoes. There are mosquitoes on the trails, of course, but it's not a massive problem. Also in the rooms, it's not, because they have lots of mesh on those windows, so it's not necessarily glass. And they also have this very clever ventilation system in the roof. So really, I was at a very hot time, and it's always pretty hot in the Amazon. But I certainly didn't miss them. Some Brazilians, obviously, with these sorts of prices, they would expect air conditioning, but they normally would expect luxury, and there are other lodges which are maybe more suited to them. One in particular further north that you can reach from Manaus, perhaps. So they have different categories. This superior room is perfectly adequate. It's a second category of room. They do have standard rooms, but for $60 more per person per night, you get an awful lot more room, literally, and you also have indoor and outdoor shower and the benefit of this ventilation system. They actually also have 3 other categories which are higher up for people who want a bit more comfort, including one with an outdoor bathtub as well as an indoor and outdoor shower. But that's just a question of how much comfort people want, I guess. This just shows you very briefly the seasons at Crystallino. So obviously there's a wet season, which they call a green season, and the dry season. Dry season obviously links ideally with a stay in the Pantanal, where you will normally see larger mammals there, as well as lots of birds and butterflies. It gets a little bit cool in the evenings in the drier period, but it's all relative. It does feel cool actually at 16 degrees after you've had 34 during the day. And in the green season, obviously, you're more likely to have, it rains all the time in the Amazon, but you'll have a bit more rain and heavier rain, but then followed by blue skies pretty much straight away. They also have a very important sustainability division. For everything that you do is dictated by sustainability and conservation, including a project with Kew Gardens. I did this screen grab from the Kew Gardens website, particularly for a project called Florida Crystallino, but they have projects with scientists who come here and also go to Crystallino, and also they invite school children to learn about the work they do in the forest, and also they visit schools from Crystallino to the schools, and also give them reasons to understand why it's important to preserve the rainforest. Quickly on to Caiman in the Pantanal. It was probably, we think, pretty much the first lodge in the Pantanal. It's also known as the most comfortable. Certainly the infrastructure is very high quality, although it's not a luxury hotel. A few things are changing there, which I need to get into quickly now before time runs out. It's massive, 53,000 hectares in size. The nearest airport is Campo Grande, which is a 3.5 to 4 hour drive away, or 50 minutes by plane. And it has 3 main sources of income: cattle ranch, conservation, or 3 main activities, I should say, rather than sources of income. Because conservation costs them money, but cattle ranching and ecotourism. Here are some of the many caiman that you see there. The lodge's name, and the capybaras, which of course you see everywhere in the Pantanal. Lots of other animals here, like these coatis, tapir, an anteater, armadillo, and lots of birds here, like spoonbills, macaws, and these jabiru storks or tuyuyus, which you see in the middle there. Activity-wise, they have 3 a day. They don't have a river here, so if you've got clients who are specifically wanting to see river otters, then they should go elsewhere. Not that it's easy to see them anywhere else either, but you won't see them here because you do excursions on land and in the lake, and otherwise you're doing excursions by day and night, or by day and in the evening here, obviously avoiding the hottest time of the year, especially depending on what time of year clients go. And they have optional activities. You pay for these particular 2 that I'm going to introduce. One is called, it's a Jaguar habituation project by the NGO called On Safari. They offer additional tours which are not included in the main price at Caiman, so you would pay a couple $100 more, and you would spend the day with the guides just looking for jaguars. If you don't book that tour, then they will normally invite the other guests who are doing the standard tours to see jaguars when they are spotted by the On Safari team and the dedicated excursions. These go anything from 1 to 3 days, and the chances are, what they were last year, that 98% of people saw jaguars. And that includes everybody, not just the people who put the extra excursion. And it started off around 10 years ago when almost nobody saw a jaguar, including the owner of Caiman. He told us that I think he was 27 before saw his first jaguar, which is pretty amazing. So On Safari have done fantastic work based on similar work which was done with leopards in Africa, Kruger National Park, and it's been very successful. They're now doing another project in the next partner I'll introduce you to after this in the Cerrado. This is an example of one of the amazing pictures. Obviously, you can go and see the jaguars. Pretty much you're likely to see them if you go further north from Cuiabá, if you go to the Rio Cuiabá, to the river there. But it's very public, so you will see jaguars there with lots of other people around you. Here at Caiman, you literally just have the people who are staying in the lodge at the time that you are there. They also have this project, which is run by a biologist who's been there since before this was even a lodge, a hotel, called Neva Guedes, and she's dedicated her life to preserving and saving from extinction these blue macaws, which are called Arara Azul. And there you actually book a half or full day trip with the biologist. So rather than just sitting in a vehicle and looking for them, you actually go and accompany the biologist on the work that they're doing. And the seasons in the Pantanal, obviously the main time to go is, well, most well known is from June to October, but I'd say any time from April is great to see a lot of wildlife, mammals as well. It starts to rain later in November and December, and then the water levels get very high and it tends to be flooded in January until March. It's obviously very hot in those months because it's the Brazilian summer. There are more mosquitoes, but there are people who go deliberately at that time because the certain wading birds in particular they get to see. It's amazing for seeing sunsets, particularly, and so there's definitely people who go. And also at that time of year, you will normally with on safari see jaguars because they know how to get to them. It's never guaranteed, of course, so I have to be careful what I say. All right, to the accommodation, you have at the moment 2 lodges called Baiazinha and Cordillera. They're about 10 kilometers away from the main entrance to the lodge. These are at the moment available for FITs. One has 6 rooms and one has 5 rooms. They work completely independently of each other. They've got their own social areas, their own restaurant, their own guides. And they're rustic, comfortable, I'd say a good 4-star standard. And as you can see on the map, they're a certain distance away from the main entrance, where I've just highlighted Casa Caiman. This is the new name for the properties which from this August will be where FIT's clients stay. And Baiazinha and Cordillera will only in the future be available for people who book them as private groups. That's changing in August, as I say. Caiman is introducing a new low season from December, so that means that they will have, well, in fact, they've already released the prices, so you save money if you go from December this year, and that's valid until March next year. This is the new property. Together, it's made up of 2 houses with 18 rooms in total. One is the old, well, let's say this is the old owner's lodge. He's now moved and built another house, so this is his very comfortable house. This has 8 rooms, and the old, if you're as old as I am, then you might remember the old Caiman Lodge, and which was the first property there, and this is now being converted to another part of Casa Caiman, and this has 10 rooms. So moving very swiftly on to the last property. So this is in the Cerrado, a much overlooked and less well-known area of Brazil. Unfortunately, this is even more endangered, suffering more encroachment than the Amazon, which is pretty amazing in itself. This is part of a massive area, very important. It's called tropical Savannah. You reach it from Brasilia, so it's a 5-hour drive or a 50-minute transfer by plane from Brasilia Airport. It's called Trijunção because it's at three junctions of the states of Bahia, Minas Gerais, and Goiás. It's a year-round destination. This is pretty much what the vegetation looks like. It's very low, low vegetation, but actually, as the WWF emphasizes, it's very important for it, for what's the word? Can't remember. Basically, it absorbs an awful lot of carbon because the small trees have very deep root systems. So it's a very important area to preserve. Unfortunately, it's falling foul of big monocultures, farms, soya particularly. But anyway, I'm afraid that's the way things are at the moment. Very important, the work that people like, although there aren't actually many others like Trijunção, the work they're doing to preserve the wildlife and the vegetation there. Excuse me. So it's the most biodiverse savanna in the world, apparently, with over 5,000 endemic plant species. Lots of endangered species, 60 altogether, 12 of them critically so. These include some of those I've mentioned in that slide. It's a year-round destination. Again, it's very hot, particularly between October and March, and mainly from December to February. Tropical rains and then dry again after, and then from April to December it's dry and cooler. I put this slide in just to show particularly those three on the right. If you're interested, do click on this article afterwards. It's very interesting, a bit depressing, I'm afraid, to know what's going on in Brazil, but you can see it in those pictures. That above, the top photo is natural, and the other two is what is done, or what they look like as a result of this progress, for want of a better word, this industrialization of the Cerrado. Why do you go? To see wildlife. There are 850 identified bird species in the Cerrado, and you will see plenty. In half an hour, just walking around the lodge, we listed 30 species with a bird watching guide, which is pretty amazing, with names and all. I can send anyone if they're interested. Lots of colorful birds, also plenty of mammal species here, and it's more difficult to see. It's not as easy to see the wildlife here as the Pantanal, and also this safari, this NGO I mentioned before, in the Pantanal, they're doing similar work here, particularly with an animal which is regarded in Brazil as a symbol of the Cerrado, which is the maned dwarf, but also with animals there. And there are animals spotted in the camera traps all the time, so panthers, pumas, and also quite a few other cats and giant anteaters, etc. So we've got videos showing all sorts of amazing footage from the camera traps if you're interested. It's also a great place to see these dwarf caiman, which are quite difficult to see generally in Brazil, but you see plenty of them here in the lake. Trijunção is also the only cattle farm in the state of Bahia, because the farm itself is in Bahia, which has got the gold standard for best practice from the government. It also operates an important breeding center, both a commercial one and also one to save, a very non-commercial one actually as well, to protect endangered species. Some of these are then rewilded in protected areas of the Atlantic forest and given to projects which do rewilding, etc. They also invite schools and universities and scientists to the farm, to the breeding centers as well. And they visit schools and again, they explain their work to people so that they understand the importance of preserving these regions. Sorry. Maximum 5 people in the groups, typically in vehicles like this with a roof to keep the sun away. And you will visit a lake, or you'll visit areas on looking out for wildlife. So this is the maned dwarf, which is actually not a wolf, but I haven't got time to go into those details. It's one of the canine species, apparently, but it's still, it's funny, in all the languages that I've checked, it's called a wolf. Which is quite funny. I wondered if the others all copied the first one who made a mistake, but for some reason it is called a maned dwarf. And on safari will take people on trips, excursions, and the idea is that you see them. It's not so easy to see these as it is to see, I shouldn't say easy, as it is to see the jaguars at the Pantanal, but they've told me up to 70%, or 70% actually, they said, of their guests this last year have seen a maned dwarf. We saw them as well when we were there, but I know of guests who haven't seen them, so we do have to be careful what we say to people. But it's still a very interesting experience, and this is a very, very short video, not even going to play it for more than a few seconds, just to see the experience a guest would have from the back of that vehicle sitting a bit higher up. As you can see here, it goes on a bit longer, but I haven't got time to show you, but I will send you links if you would like to the videos afterwards, just let me know. The main lodge is built on the site of the old farm here, true to its original architecture, which mirrors the original buildings, built in line again with sustainability in mind, including solar panels for water heating, use of demolition wood, materials collected in a sustainable way in the cerrado, such as bark and branches, dead trees, fallen leaves, fruits, etc. Staff is from the not very nearby villages, up to an hour away, and they have lots of attention to detail, using plants and handicrafts in the decoration generally, in the rooms and also in these public areas, which are beautiful. And there's a little bird watching tower you can see there. Lots of hammocks dotted around, 7 air-conditioned rooms altogether. The 2 pictures at the top show the master suite, which is very big and includes one of these Brazilian oforos, these sort of jacuzzis, that's what they call them in English. And the three premium suites also have a living room like the master suite does, and they also have then 3 standard rooms, which are basically just those rooms, but also pretty big, also beautiful, very nicely. And they do actually also have a little hall as well. They have a small swimming pool and a sauna nearby, fantastic food. A lot of Brazilians know this area and associate it with a book by a very famous Brazilian author who's particularly known for this one book. His name is Guimarães Rosa, and the book is called Grandes Sertão Veredas. Apparently in English it's called The Devil to Pay in the Backlands or something like that. Not so famous in English, but every Brazilian knows it pretty much. Who's culturally inclined, and the food is really fantastic there, I have to say. They have these ideas from the book, which is also all taken from local culture. So people eat indoors and outdoors, and so they have barbecues there as well. And I just noticed the other day that I hadn't used a single picture of local people, so I quickly put one in here of Veronica, who is the life and soul of the restaurant and bar, to represent all of the amazing local people who work in the properties I've introduced today, and also, I really have to say, in lots of our other partners as well. Always smiling and a bundle of fun. Doesn't speak English, I'm afraid. And that's it. If you have any questions, please do get in touch with me. And if you're interested in presentations of any of these properties, or in fact any of our partners, do let me know. It would have been ideal if I could have introduced another partner in Brazil called Ivichipoca at the same time, because they have a lot of things in common. Less of the wildlife, although they do have a project with a particular very important monkey there, but that will have to wait for another webinar, which we will prepare for another day. Anyway, thanks very much for your time and for your patience, because I have run on a little bit longer than I was hoping to. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.